Hey there guys, I am the Six Machine and welcome back to another Warhammer video. Today I wanted to get a start on a new series which I'm hoping will be something we carry on doing on the channel over time as factions, armies and units come out and get updated in codexes and that kind of thing. And that is having a look at specific units within each of the army's rosters and essentially not having a full-on tactica about them, but basically just having a look at their stats, their weapons, their rules, and having a general chat and overview about their usefulness, whether they're efficient, and whether you should be bringing them in your army. Now, this will, again, I hope, develop over time, and if you guys want to see more in-depth tactica discussions and strategies, and maybe even some opinions from the lovely Heralds of Hobby chaps, that's something that I'm definitely eager and happy to push towards, but for now, I just thought we'd keep it nice, easy, and simple. So with that in mind, I thought we would start with the unit which is often overlooked even by GW, it seems, considering they came out with the Shadow Spear box over a year ago and don't seem to have any sign of an individual release anytime soon. Yep, you guessed it, the Suppressors. Now these guys are where to start, really. I guess a good place would be the immediate thing you notice, and that is how they look. They're Vanguard Marines, but they have the Omnis pattern armor, which I don't think anything else in the game uses at the moment. It's basically a mishmash of an Intercessor top half and an Inceptor bottom half. I'll be honest, between the fiddly jump stands and their frankly pretty bad poses, especially if you have more than 3 of them because they are still just one kit, they aren't the greatest things to see on the tabletop. And lots of people complained about their little boot grills and the awkwardness of them toting autocannons, which were pretty much longer than their bodies, and yeah, to be fair, I agree. I mean, they just don't look particularly great. I think if they'd had shorter guns or slightly less goofy poses, or hell, they were just on the ground to begin with, they would look a lot more like the Primaris Devastators, which many people I think assumed they were going to be. And I think a big part of their problem, funnily enough, both looks and rules-wise, is that they can't quite decide what they want to be. They look like they should be set up somewhere defensive and just pour down firepower on the enemy with the guns they have, but they also look like they should be jumping around the board really fast as like this fast-moving unit, and it just doesn't quite feel right when you look at them. There's something a bit sort of... There's a bit of a dichotomy in terms of how they look between their guns and the armor and like their jump pack kind of thing. And likewise, when it comes to their rules, there's just this weird disparity that puts you at odds as to what exactly you want them to be doing. So as you can see on the screen now, they have a pretty standard Primaris Marine stat line. They're toughness 4, they've got 2 wounds, they've got a 3-up save, but they have a pretty awesome 12-inch move on top of that, which is great. A fast-moving unit so they can get around the board, relocate, and do all sorts of movement-related shenanigans. But then you look at the gun. They have a 48-inch range gun, and it's heavy. So I mean, when you deploy them, you can pretty much set them up where they need to be for the game, and 99% of the time, they're going to have the range to tag whatever you want them to. You shouldn't need to move them around all the time. It's not like they have a 12-inch melter that needs to get right up in the enemy's face. These guys aren't made for melee, and they aren't really all that tough, so you pretty much want them back and in cover just firing on the enemy. So why the 12-inch move? And on top of that, of course, they have a heavy gun. So there's even less incentive to move them, because as soon as you do, you're infantry keyword, so you're immediately dropping down to hitting on 4s rather than 3s. Likewise, they have the much sought after ability Death from Above, which lets you deploy them from reinforcements from turn 2, as long as they're over 9 inches away from the enemy. But again, why would you want them that close? Realistically, why would you need to deploy them like that at all? Unless your board really doesn't allow any fire lanes at all from either player's deployment zone, you are almost guaranteed to at least have a place to set them up during deployment. When it comes to their firepower itself, I don't actually think it's that bad. It changed slightly moving from 8th to give an extra shot at the expense of an AP. So you're basically rocking 3 strength 7 minus 1 AP, 2 damage shots per suppressor, and they come in squads of 3 for weirdly 100 points. It doesn't quite add up, and you can't add more to the squad, so they don't appear to have an individual points cost for a model, which is again slightly weird. It kind of gives the impression that GW almost don't care about them, but that does effectively net you 9 strength 7 shots for 100 points, with a very decent range and doing 2 damage each, which is not too shabby against a lot of targets, and being able to deal with the 2 wound meta at the moment, as well as really taking a good chunk out of light vehicles such as Venoms, is a pretty solid use for these guys. And even against things like Rhinos and Chimeras in turn 1, you've got that extra -1 AP because of Devastator Doctrine, so that does make them significantly better at trying to bracket these sorts of vehicles before they reach your lines, although it is fair to say that they won't fare well if they are your only option for anti-tank. Strength 7, relatively low AP even in Devastator Doctrine, and a flat 2 damage just won't cut it compared to Las Cannons and Las Talons and Melter, for example. I do think that going up to 3 shots from 2 did make quite a nice difference to them, and it's a slight net buff compared to the extra AP that they had before. I believe they also dropped 5 points to the flat 100 points in the latest codex, which does just make them that tiny little bit more efficient than they used to be. One of the unique things that they bring that I don't think is, certainly not in the Marine Codex, I don't know if any other codexes have an ability like it, but is their suppressing fire ability. This used to be that if you caused an unsaved wound on an enemy, they couldn't fire Overwatch against a charging unit. It has been buffed quite significantly to just require a hit on an enemy unit. However, it does now specify it's against infantry units only, and this can potentially be a very nice ability to have. If you have, say, some Blood Angels or Space Wolves who are about to make a charge against a unit with a load of flamers or other auto-hitting weapons, you can totally shut down that unit's Overwatch and allow your other squad to reach combat completely unscathed. And I do think that a lot of people tend to overlook this ability when they think about suppressors, because yeah, I mean, it is a great ability, don't get me wrong. The thing that I take issue with it, the problem that I have with it, is that it benefits a lot of armies that I think typically wouldn't think about bringing suppressors anyway. Suppressors are a fast attack slot, so they have a lot of competition from other shooter units anyway, in the form of attack bikes, invader ATVs, land speeders, and inceptors, which I think all are arguably more useful overall than suppressors. But for those specific armies that want to be in combat, you've also got to consider that their fast attack slots are probably going to be taken up with stuff that they actually want to get into combat anyway, things like Outriders or Thunderwolf Cavalry, stuff that isn't going to just help their units get into combat, but stuff that is actually going to want to get into combat itself and do the killing. That's what they're going to be looking for in their fast attack slots. I feel like as a Dark Angel player, I can definitely see some uses for suppressors, and that's for a few reasons. Firstly, the Dark Angel chapter tactic means that they'll be hitting on 2s if I keep them still, which in the way that Dark Angels play, which is a lot more immobile than some other chapters. There are certainly Dark Angel, Deathwing specifically and Ravenwing, but a lot of Dark Angel, especially Greenwing armies, tend to stay a lot more static than other armies do, certainly with various units, and this hitting on 2s or getting +1 to hit, to be more accurate, is a definite buff for suppressors when you can just keep them in the backfield and shoot down range with them and not have to move them too much. The other thing that makes them very good for Dark Angels is that turn 1, the Super Doctrine for Dark Angels means that they've got a 54-inch range instead of 48. So in theory, they should be able to pretty much tag anything on the board, assuming it's not out of line of sight. I can also see their use for Dark Angels in that, as I said, Dark Angels aren't sort of what you think of as your typically melee-heavy army compared to, say, White Scars or Space Wolves or Blood Angels, but they definitely have a lot of use in removing Overwatch if you are, say, deep striking a squad of Deathwing Knights who can then charge into the enemy lines without losing any of the precious expensive models to Overwatch. So I do certainly think that for some chapters and some types of armies, suppressors can have a spot, but I think the problem with them is that they suffer a lot from the generalization that they seem to have across their toolkit. They have great movement, but their guns are better staying still. They have a decent number of shots, but it's not really enough for anti-horde, and it's not really strong enough for anti-tank. They have a place in a melee list, but they don't really fit because you'll probably just want more melee units in a melee army, and they fit into a range list, but then you've got an ability which you're probably never going to use in denying Overwatch, because if your army is predominantly shooty, you're not going to have that much stuff that's going to be moving forward and making charges. It just seems as though suppressors are the end result of the being good at several things but master of none mindset, which unfortunately leaves them in a place where you're usually better off taking something else which has got a more specific focus, something that can specifically deal with hordes, or something that can specifically deal with tanks, or something that you definitely want to keep back and shoot and it's really good at that, or something that you can move around and capture objectives or get into melee. And when you're taking one of these units, because it's more specific, you're not wasting any potential, which you are doing when you are bringing suppressors, and you're at the end of the day paying points for skills and abilities and profile changes and profile stats that you're not going to be using. I will state that I do have 3 squads of 3 suppressors, and I do tend to bring them in a lot of the games that I play, but that is purely because the size of the games that me and the people that I play with play means that I tend to have to bring almost all my Dark Angels purely because of the size of the stuff that I have painted. And as I said, they do benefit from Dark Angels, I think, more than any other chapter, because I can just leave them at the back and they have range to hit stuff and they have hitting on 2s as long as I don't move them. So that really does benefit them quite a bit. But I don't think that many, if any, other chapters really have a solid use for them. They go up to a good amount of damage with Imperial Fists turn 1, for example, but again, their strength and AP definitely holds them back from shooting at a lot of the really heavy targets that you want 3 damage weapons going after. I kind of think that the final nail for suppressors is the lack of support that they seem to have been given so far from GW as well. When they were first released, I remember people suggesting that they may get other weapon options, las talons or some kind of melter variant, or even something completely new like a platform for an infantry-based onslaught Gatling cannon kind of weapon. But this seems to be increasingly unlikely, as we've now seen the Eradicators and the Eliminators with the melter and the las weaponry. And like I said, there's no signs that there's any new options or even a separate kit for the suppressors coming out anytime soon. So I mean, have they been left out in the cold by GW? And was it because of the pretty negative feedback they got on how they looked when they first came out? I don't know. I don't know if there's something planned in the pipeline for suppressors in the future, but certainly at the moment there seems to be no push from GW to give them their own kit or give them some new weapon options that may make them slightly more viable, or certainly I think if they had planned to change up their stat line to make them more focused on one thing or the other, whether you make them something that is meant to just sit back and shoot, or if you kind of double down on the movement side of things and give them some kind of option for an assault weapon so they can move around and capture objectives and then still pump out some medium level firepower. There's certainly no evidence that anything like that is coming soon. So yeah, I unfortunately think that, as I said, the problem with them is that whatever task you want them for, there is, especially in the Marine Codex. I mean, this may not be quite so prevalent in other codexes where they have less options, but suppressors definitely suffer for being in the Marine Codex, and anything that you want them to do, there is something that can do it better and more efficient for the points. So I would love to hear your thoughts on suppressors, whether you use them and what chapter you run them as and what chapter you think they are best as. I'm kind of inclined to think that it's probably going to be Dark Angels, purely because I think the way most people play them is to just sit them back at long range as possible, and pump firepower into 2-wound infantry or light vehicles, and Dark Angels let them do that really quite well. But let me know if you have another chapter that you think they work very well with and how you use them. And please do let me know if you'd like to see other videos like this, where we take a look at a specific unit in a codex and do a quick overview about what we think about it, what's good and what's bad about it, and whether we think it's worth taking. So thanks again for watching, and please do like and subscribe for more from me. Until next time, I will catch you later, guys.